Welcome to Fruity Knitting. This is episode 64 and I'm Andrea.
And I'm Andrew.
And you will have seen from the title that we're featuring Shetland fine lace knitting in this episode. So we have an interview with two Shetland sisters, Eunson and Kathleen Anderson, who are considered to be expert lace knitters in Shetland. They're quite well known. And during the Shetland Wool Week, they were giving classes in advanced lace knitting. So in the interview, they talk about some of their favourite traditional Shetland lace stitch patterns and how they like to use them and how they like to combine them to create the most amazing and intricate fine lace shawls, which you'll totally love. So both women are very charming. It was one of my personal favourite interviews to have done, and I think you're really going to enjoy them.
Yep. We're also going to meet Marie Greene as our guest in Knitters of the World. We've got a couple more of our memories from Shetland to share with you, and we've also got two finished projects to show off in Bring and Brag, and I think we're going to start with that with me.
Yes, yay. Andrew has finally finished his fingerless gloves.
That's right.
Mittens.
So this is the Chili Podster Mitts by Glenna C. It's a free pattern available on Ravelry. You can find it there. As you can see, it is a fingerless glove, but it has this little flip-top head over the top. So when it's really cold, you can pop your fingers away and there they are. And I've said before, the reason I really want these gloves is that when we go walking out in the cold in Germany, it does get down below zero and we're still out there. And I have to use the camera. I can flip the top off and there's my fingers and I can do everything we need to do with the camera.
We're very coordinated.
Which is, you're a whiz at doing this hand modelling, dolls. I can see a career in that for you.
I'm a good prop assistant.
So that's that. I've knitted it in the DK Hebridean yarn from the Yorkshire Wildlife Trust, which we've spoken about before on the show. It's a good rustic yarn. It's also the same yarn as my hiking jacket, so I'm going to be terribly well coordinated when I'm out there.
You are.
It was a pretty tricky knit for me. I don't think it's really hard, but it has lots of intricate bits and there's not many sort of long stretches where you just get to relax. And so that was a little bit of a challenge for me, but I got there in the end. I do feel like it's maybe a little bit small. This cap over the top seems to grab my fingers a little bit much. You've said that we can probably get a bit of space out of blocking it.
When we block it, you can definitely get a centimetre wider in that for sure. But I would just hold off on that because it's different when your hands are cold.
That's right. Who knows what I'll want when we're out there in the snow. So I think that's a good idea. We'll wait, and I'm really looking forward to trying these out in the field, dolls. Yes.
Yay. Well done, because that's quite a tricky knit, and this wool it's rustic and it can split a little bit, so you've done well.
Yep.
But it's also really hard wearing, which is great because it means you're holding a dirty dog lead or picking up some snow, and it's really appropriate.
That's how it is.
Well done.
So that's finished. I've now moved on to another sock for Andrea.
Yes, he owes me a sock. Every
one jumper, one sock.
That's right. Every jumper I knit him, he has to knit me a sock. And actually, he's got another more exciting project, but we're waiting for the yarn to come.
Yep.
We're up to under construction with me. I'll show you where I'm at with Andrew's jumper. Try not to poke him in the eyes while I'm doing it. No, I think that's fine. So you can see that I've knitted the body in the round up to the armholes, and same with both sleeves. And what's really cool about this design is that the colour work stops in a straight line right across the body and the sleeves together. I think that's a really cool idea.
That's brilliant, darling.
Yeah, but it's not my design, it's Jade Starmore's design. And so I've taken her pattern, which is written as a cardigan for a woman, and I'm making it into a gentleman's jumper.
I always love it when you say that, doll.
Yes. Anyway, so the big thing here is that now that it was pretty free sailing up to the armholes, but now I have to rewrite everything to do with the armholes upwards. And that's because I've taken the size large because that fits Andrew's chest size, but a woman who wears size large will not be as wide in the upper body and the shoulders as Andrew is. So that means if I was to write the pattern as written, his shoulder seam here wouldn't sit on his shoulders. It would be somewhere halfway between his shoulders and his neck, and it would end up being a bit like this. Not a good look.
Doesn't look so good, no.
And not a good
Don't do that.
feel. So that's why I have to rewrite it. So I thought I'd just show you how I go about modifying a pattern for set-in sleeves, which is the tricky part. And so I've done a few diagrams, which I hope you find relatively understandable. They're in centimetres, but it applies just the same with inches as well. So the first thing you do need to know is the chest measurement. And I've done it up in the round so far, but from now on I'll be knitting it flat. So any measurements that I give you is just either for the front or the back piece. Before you start doing any calculations at all, you need to know your row gauge, which will give you the length, and your stitch gauge, which will give you the width. They're absolutely important. So Andrew's measurement across the chest for the front piece is 53 centimetres. The next measurement I need to know is the upper back, which on Andrew is 42 centimetres. So I have 153 stitches at the chest, and I need to decrease down to 121 stitches for the upper back. So that means I need to decrease 32 stitches, and that's 16 stitches at each armhole. And the armholes usually decrease over a length of 4 to 7 centimetres, and I'm going to decrease over 5.5 centimetres, which means, in my gauge, 22 rows. So if you just think of looking at one side at a time, that means I'm decreasing 16 stitches over 22 rows. And you can plot the decreases on a graph paper if you want to, just to make sure you get that really nice smooth slope. But what I'm doing is the initial bind off is usually 1.5 to 2.5 centimetres, followed by successively fewer stitches and ending with just a few single stitch bind offs. So I am decreasing 6 stitches in my first cast off, which is 2 centimetres. Then I'm decreasing 3 stitches, which is 1 centimetre, and then 1 stitch 3 times, and then every alternate row 1 stitch 4 times. So that's fairly simple, but you can see that that gives it a really nice curve. So doing the decreases on the body and getting that really nice slope is fairly simple, but it is somewhat tricky to make sure that your sleeve caps are going to fit into your sleeve armholes. There's a few things that you have to follow, but it is really important, and I forgot to say it earlier, that the upper body, the upper shoulder measurement and is really important, and the depth of the armhole is really important. These things you really have to work on. For instance, if the upper body is too wide, then it'll end up meaning that you have too much fabric underneath the arm, and the sleeve shaping itself will look more like a modified drop shoulder than a set-in sleeve. And in contrast, if the upper body is too narrow, as it would be written for a female, then what it will do is it pulls the shoulder seam up over the shoulder, so it actually pulls the cap of the sleeve up over the shoulder, which has the result of also making the sleeves too short. So all of these considerations have to be taken
into consideration.
Absolutely. So here's 2 more diagrams for you, which I hope you can understand. In general, the sleeve cap needs to be around 5 to 10 centimetres shorter than the armhole depth on the body. So for Andrew, I'm going to make his sleeve cap 7 centimetres shorter than his armhole depth, which means the cap depth will be 15 centimetres, which equals 61 rows. You can see the cap on the set-in sleeve is sort of shaped a bit like a bell, and you can divide the cap into around 4 different sections to help you understand how to go about placing the decreases. So the first thing that's easiest to do is to go to the first section, and that's the initial bind off, and that should mirror the shaping on the body armholes for at least the first couple of bind offs. So I will cast off 6 stitches and then 3 stitches and then 1 stitch 3 times at the beginning of the row. And if you remember, that's exactly what I did at the start of my body shaping on the armhole. You then go to the 4th section, which is the final bind off, and generally this should be around 1/4 of the upper arm width. So Andrew's arm width is 35 centimetres, so that means the final bind off needs to be around 8 centimetres wide, which is, for my gauge, 22 stitches. So the next thing you can do is you go to the section 3, which is the top slope, which has a fairly steep curve, and it's worked over the last around 1.5 centimetres length of the cap, and it takes off around 2.5 centimetres off the width of each side of the cap. That's sort of just roughly. So again, you work this out with your row and stitch count, and I adjusted the stitch count slightly, which you can do. You do have freedom to do that. So I'll cast off 16 stitches over 6 rows. So then it comes to the second section, which is the biggest section and the section that you've actually got more freedom to play with. So you take the number of stitches in the upper arm and subtract the stitches that you will cast off in sections 1, 3 and 4, and that'll give you the number of stitches that you need to decrease in section 2. For Andrew, that's 38 stitches. You do the same with the row count. So that means that you take the total needed row count and you minus the rows that you used up in section 1, 3 and 4, and what's left is your row count. And for Andrew, that is 44 rows. So that works out as decreasing 1 stitch at each end, roughly every alternate row, and that's what you can play around with. So that's my process of modifying a garment with set-in sleeves that's knitted bottom up, and I hope that you got the basic concept for how I work it out, and that's helpful for you, even though it's Andrew's measurements and it's all in centimetres, and I know a lot of you on the other side of the pond like to use inches, but the concept is the same.
Yeah, dolls, they were quite intimate details you were giving out there, which is, can we maybe do it again, just not with any numbers? Is that a bit hard?
I think it's good to see some numbers because then you actually see it in...
Well, I suppose, the other side of it is we've now shown everyone how to custom modify a jumper so that it fits me. It works for any set-in sleeve jumper, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So everyone's able to knit me jumpers. So if you want to make a jumper to fit me, you can send it in. And I guess the fair deal is that I would have to knit a pair of socks for whoever sends in the jumpers.
You're digging a grave here,
I know,
Andrew.
it's a little bit risky. There's a lot of knitters out there and one little me knitting socks.
I think we should move on.
Yeah.
We have a couple more lovely memories of Shetland that we wanted to share with you in this episode. I've spoken about James Rebank's book, A Shepherd's Life, a few times on the show before, but very quickly for new viewers, if you haven't read the book, it's a great, well-written, deeply insightful account of a sheep farmer's life. And James writes in the book the importance of the yearly competition and auction. And in Shetland, the one or major auction event also happened during the Wool Week. So having read the book, both of us reading the book and feeling like we had a deeper insight into the life and passions of a sheep farmer, we were really excited to go to the auction and check it out. And it just so happened in the auction that I sat next to the farmer, Hamish, who won the overall top show sheep champion. Yep. So I asked him lots of questions and tried to pick his brains, and despite my probably annoying questions, he was extremely polite and friendly, a lovely man. He was sitting there with his family of 3 lovely redhead little girls with their overalls and their...
All red, overalls, they were looking great.
Yeah, and their Wellingtons, Wellington boots on. It's a real exciting atmosphere, the auction. And so he won the show champion, but also quite a few other first prizes in different categories. And I asked him, it's funny, I asked him if he was happy with the price that he got for the show champion, and he said he was completely thrilled. It was a top price and everything was great. But you'll see him very soon. You can't see that on his face at all. He's absolutely poker-faced while the bidding's going on, and the bidding is very exciting. So we've just got a 2-minute section to show you of the sale of this top sheep, and you'll see Hamish in the pen. He's the sort of more stockier, slightly older man standing at the back, very poker face. You can't tell that he's excited or not excited about the price. And there's another younger man, and his job is to keep the sheep moving in the pen so that all the farmers get to have a look and can really judge him. And most of the sheep in the auction are just being sold as good, tough, healthy breeding stock for the rest of the UK and Scotland. But the bidding is really interesting because you can't see who's bidding. I was desperately trying to find who's doing the bidding because they're very almost like just little nods or movements of the head or eyes or something. But the bidding's happening quite fast, which really adds to the drama of it all. Yep. So we've got a 2-minute segment of the show champion sheep getting sold, and we hope you enjoy it.
We push around there, we can see him move. 3 shear there this time from Hamish. Well, we see this time. Are we going to be at, I can suggest maybe 3,000 1800, 1500, 1600, 1700, 1800, 1900, 2000. 2000 a bit. At 2000, 2000 a bit. 200 a bit. 200 a bit. 2000 a bit. 2000. At 2000 a bit. 2000, 2000. Anybody else want to go here now? At 2000, 2000 a bit. 2000, 2000 a bit. 2000, 2000. Look long and hard at this. 2000, 2000 a bit. 2000, 2000, 2000. Anybody else? 2100, 2200, 23, 2400, 2500, 26, 27, 28, 28, 2008. Help me fill it in now. 28. It's all small steps. 29, 29, 3000, 3000, 3000, 3000 a bed, 3000, 3000, 3000, 3000 pound bed. At 3000 a bed, that's 3 folk to come. I turn it in and he's still in. At 3,000 a bed, at 300, at 3 in bed, at 3,000, 3,000, 3,000. Goes to the market then. As you does you, yeah, reluctantly. At 3,000, 3,000 a bed, at 300, at 3,000, 3,000. He goes in this time at 3,000. I think that deserves a round of applause to both parties.
Another scene that we would like to share with you today is we're going to meet Kathleen Anderson very shortly in our interview. We spoke to Kathleen. She loves to go hiking with her husband around Shetland. We met the two of them and they actually said they've walked along most of the coastline of Shetland, which is pretty amazing.
It is.
Given that Shetland, there's a lot of coastline in Shetland with all the little islands, so they know their way around. So we asked them for recommendations, and one of the places that Kathleen recommended was a place called Westerwick, which is coming up very shortly. But before that, and actually before we got to Westerwick, we went to a place called Culswick, which is very close by. We went for a little wander there and we came across this beautiful old stone building. It looked quite simple. We found out it's actually from 1893. We went round the back and it's got this lovely red door, which is very inviting. It's, essentially says, please come in.
Yeah.
So we did try this door and it was open, and it turned out it is this beautiful church with this stunning wooden panelling on the side, really thick walls, and these big, deep window sills, wood panelling, these little wooden traditional pews there. But it also had a very old, it was a 19th century pump organ up the front.
Beautifully carved.
Yeah, so it's all carved out of wood and sitting there in the corner. And Andrea, being a pianist, had a go.
I played a hymn.
Yeah, so Andrea played a hymn. We've got a little bit of footage of that. It is a pump organ, and Andrea is sitting there. You can't exactly see it, but pumping with her feet.
It was quite noisy.
And it is quite noisy. It's an old thing, and it's probably not in the best condition, but it did play. So
Here's a little memory.
yep.
my name is Marie Greene. I am a knitwear designer and knitting teacher in the Pacific Northwest, Oregon, and my business is Olive Knits. My passion is for seamless sweaters. I love really classic minimal styles. You can see this one right behind me is very indicative of my work. It's top down, it's seamless, it's got a really crisp, clean aesthetic, and that's what I really love. And I'd love to show you a little bit more about my work and also tell you a little bit more about how I got started as both a knitter and a designer. I began knitting as a child. I was about 10 years old when my grandmother taught me, and I think she saw in me just this real desire to keep my hands busy and to always be creative. I had always been into things like sewing and embroidery and cooking and really anything that was creative and gave me a chance to explore and try out different things. So when she taught me to knit, it just immediately felt right. I absolutely loved doing it. And throughout my young life, I was just always knitting, and I grew up not knowing really any other knitters, so it always felt really unusual to be pulling out my knitting as a child, and people would look at me and give me strange looks. So for a while I thought I was, this dying breed, and it was only as I got older that I discovered this amazing fiber industry and that there are millions of us, and it was such a lovely discovery to realize I wasn't alone. But I didn't really fall in love with sweaters until I was a little bit older. Most of my young knitting was spent knitting Barbie clothes and baby booties and little small things because that's really all I had ever seen. And most of the books I had these designs that were just not what I was looking for. They were much older styles, and although they really inspired me, I could never find something that was quite what I was looking for. So I didn't really discover my love for sweaters until I was about in my late 20s, early 30s, and I started just sort of creating patterns that had the look that I wanted. And that was, I guess, the beginning of me being a designer, because I just kept realizing that if I want a specific style, maybe I just need to come up with it myself. And for a lot of years, I just was designing for myself and my family and not really ever thinking of turning them into patterns and putting them out into the world. And it was only 5 or 6 years ago when knitters started seeing me in my sweaters and asking me about them that I thought, well, let's give this a try. And it's been such a fun adventure. My design philosophy is really pretty simple. I love seamless design. It really fits the way that I knit and the way that I think. I'm a very on-the-go knitter, and I love to be able to just stick my knitting in my bag and take it with me wherever I go. And so having projects that I can pick up and put down without having to really fuss over where I am in the pattern or worry about checking a chart, that's always been really important to me. And it works so well with seamless sweaters. So that's what's probably really made me fall in love with them. And then when I'm finished, I'm finished. But I've also realized there are some inherent challenges to seamless sweaters. And so because of that, I've really loved exploring this design style and finding new ways to create better fit and better structure and just overall create a better sweater, but that it just so happens it doesn't have seams. And I want to share a few of those pieces with you today and just tell you a little bit about what I've done with them. This sweater is called Sandscape, and one of the things I really love about it is this slip stitch detail down the front. It's just very clean and very simple, but that placement gives you a nice vertical visual, and it gives you a little something fun to do while you're working the sweater, but it becomes very intuitive, and it means that you can do a lot of that mindless social knitting that I personally love so much, but still get this really beautiful result for a sweater that's so classic and something that you can just really wear with practically anything. And I incorporated the slip stitches not only down the front, but also down the arms and on the back. So you get a little bit of that fun, really clean, almost embossed texture. So it's just a hint of it and a little detail that just keeps it interesting without being too busy. And another thing that I really love about this one is it's a good way to show you some of that arm shaping that I love to do. And it's just this really clean, sort of elegant shaping around the arm that creates this really lovely fit that almost feels set-in, but is actually not a set-in sleeve, but it does end up feeling that way when you're wearing it. So you can kind of see that more on the front as well. This next piece that I want to show you is my beekeeper cardigan, and this one is a lot of fun because it's part of our year 2 4-day knit along. And the goal of the 4-day knit along really isn't to knit it in 4 days necessarily. It's just to challenge yourself to knit a sweater more quickly than you've knit it in the past. And so we had a lot of fun with people at all skill levels and all time frames working on this sweater this year. And I incorporated a few really fun techniques to make this a sweater that works really well for efficient knitting. And a couple of those are no buttons on the button band. And that has proven to be a time saver just naturally because you don't have to work those buttonholes or attach the buttons. A shorter length. So the cropped length, I just personally love wearing cropped length sweaters anyway because I'm short-waisted. I'm a tall person, but I have a short waist. And then 3/4 sleeves, which are obviously another time saver. But another thing I did with this sweater, which I thought was really important, is that because it doesn't have buttons and because it's top down and seamless, and because there's a little bit of silk in the fiber that I used, I wanted to make sure I was really careful about the construction around the shoulders and the upper back because I want the sweater to stay on. So I created this sort of crazy mock saddle that was really, really narrow at top, and then it branches out over the arms, but it just hugs the shoulders so beautifully, and it means that the sweater really stays on regardless of the fact that there aren't these other things in place that usually will keep your shoulder on. And in the back a little bit, you can sort of see that I've really brought these raglan edges back, and there's just this little tiny saddle shoulder there. And then the sleeve, if you look there, kind of morphs down from there into a proper sleeve. But that narrower construction at the top really helps that sweater to stay on. This sweater is another fun one, and it's got a little bit of everything that I love. It's top down, it's seamless. I picked up the neckline afterwards, which I do for almost all of my sweaters because I think it adds that extra structure, gives you a little bit of control over the neckline, which I love doing after the fact, and then deciding, how much I want that neckline to come up for me. And but at the same time, it has this really modern, fun twist on the front. And so what I did was I worked it in the round to about here, and then I cast on extra stitches and began working flat in order to create this lace panel that's in the front. And the lace panel crosses over a panel of seed stitch. So that juxtaposition of a really dense seed stitch with a really wavy kind of light lace mini panel creates this fun offset front. There's no short rows, no other interesting shaping. It's completely just that difference between what happens with lace and what happens with a denser stitch pattern. And it's a really fun visual as well when I try and talk to people about how much lace will grow and how much, cables or dense texture don't. I like to say the eyelet giveth and the cable taketh away, and that same philosophy is true here, which is how we get this fun shaping. And so this front panel is actually separate and open, and I just tacked it down afterwards at the angle that I liked. And this sweater is called Washed Ashore. This design is called Lotta, and it's one of my absolute favorites because it really embodies my design aesthetic. It's minimalist with a few very strategic, lovely details, and it's very wearable. You may recognize this from Lina Magazine issue 5. It was a real honor to be included. I love this piece because of just this juxtaposition of texture up top with reverse stockinette and these twisted knit stitch details that sort of remind me of raindrops dribbling down window panes. And I also love this pleat in the front. I thought that was just a fun way to add a little extra room in the body without any complicated shaping. In general, I would say I'm a sweater knitter first and foremost. I love sweaters, very passionate about them. And my design philosophy is really to design things that are not only fun to make, but also very wearable. I'm very conscientious about what knitters are really going to be able to wear. What will I want to wear? What's going to work in my closet and work with my body type? And so I'm always looking at ways to create patterns that are going to give knitters not just a great experience to knit, but a very practical end result that they're going to love. And so if you love your sweater in the end and you wear it a lot, that's a success in my book. And that's really my mission as a designer, to create sweaters that knitters are going to love to wear and get a lot of use out of.
Thank you, Marie, for your contribution. I thought it was really interesting, the visual description of that pattern, washed ashore. That's the one that's asymmetrical. So you've got the front lace panel, because it's looser, just naturally becoming longer, and the underneath panel, which is in a moss stitch, pulling the fabric in slightly shorter and more dense. That really showed off well there. I thought that was cool. So thanks, Marie. And Marie is offering Fruity Knitting patrons a 25% discount off all of her self-published patterns in her Ravelry store. And top-down and seamless constructions are something that many knitters really enjoy doing, and Marie loves designing sweaters and cardigans and has a heap of them for you to choose from. And I think many of them are really suitable for less experienced knitters. And like Marie said, she puts a lot of care into writing clear, no stress patterns that fit really well. So enjoy looking through her store. So now it's up to the patron speech.
Yay.
Yay. In a nutshell, thank you so much to all of our wonderful, faithful, generous patrons who have supported the show so that there are now 64 episodes out for everyone to view. Without your support, this show would not have happened. So thank you so much.
Yeah, that's really true. It is, however, also true that we do need to increase the level of support so that we can make the production of the show really something that's sustainable for us ongoing into the future.
Yeah, so if you are a regular viewer, please do become a patron. You can do so for a small amount.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're quickly going back to bring and brag because I've got a finished project. It's a sewing project. It's not a knitting project. This is a knitting podcast, so I'll be brief, but it is my tweed that I bought at Jamieson's of Shetland in Shetland, and I thought you might like to see that it's been completed into a successful skirt. So it's an A-line skirt, very simple, with a yoke and a zipper in the center of the back there. I have used this pattern before. It's the McCall's M7022. And I've actually even used it on Shetland tweed before, but I was just too adventurous in my last attempt. I tried to cut the fabric on the skirt on the bias so that it would be more drapey, but the problem with that is that it made my zipper not lie flat. It was always wavy, and I took the zipper out multiple times, and despite reinforcing the zipper in all different ways, I couldn't get rid of the wave or the bumpy zipper. So I thought this time, because the material is so precious, I wasn't going to be adventurous and I was just going to follow the pattern exactly, and it worked. So it lies really flat on me, which is lovely. And you can see I've got the same colour zipper, which is cute. The pattern didn't say to put lining in, but I have. So you can see there. Do you want to, have one of your hands?
Of course.
So you can see I've put lining in, which is nice. And I think it's nice to put lining in because for two reasons. You don't want the tweed wool to sort of stick on your stockings and ride up or cling to your legs. And also in winter, it just makes it extra warm. So it was very easy, very sort of successful. There's the lining underneath. The yarns that they use in their weaving material are the same yarns that they use in the knitting material. And if you look closely, you can see the same colours that they have. And I think they've got over 220 colours in their whole range. And it's just a different ply. So you can actually make yourself a Jamieson's of Shetland skirt to go with your Jamieson's of Shetland jumper, which I am actually wearing. So I don't know if you can see it down there, but it's perfectly matchy-matchy.
Beautiful.
It's very exciting to walk around in a completely Jamieson's of Shetland outfit. So I'm pleased that I didn't stuff this one up. And I've got material to make Madeline one, so I'll make her one too. So there we go.
Yep. We would like to remind our Shetland patrons that we have a live event this coming Saturday with Louisa Harding, who we interviewed back in episode 59.
Yeah, Louisa is highly trained and experienced as a designer, and she's held head designing positions with major magazines and yarn companies, and she's also very open and friendly, so you'll get to ask her lots of questions. So remember to put that date in your calendar and send in your questions for her to look over as soon as you can.
Yep, that's going to be a really great event.
So it's up to the interview now, You're going to find Anne and Kathleen totally charming. It was great fun to do this interview. And right at the end, Anne tells you a really funny story, which you're going to find hilarious.
Yep.
So, and I'm sure by the end of it, you're going to have a completely new appreciation of fine lace knitting. So enjoy it, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Yeah, thanks for being with us today. We'll see you in 2 weeks' time. Bye.
So fare thee well, me bonny old girl, I never see no more. But I'll never forget your kindness and the cottage by the shore, and at each social gathering a flowing glass I'll raise and drink a health to me Creole girl from the lakes of Pontchartrain.
Welcome to Fruity Knitting. I'm in Shetland, and with me today are two Shetland sisters, Eunson and Kathleen Anderson, who are both very well known expert lace knitters. And both Anne and Kathleen learnt to knit very early in life, and like a lot of Shetlanders during that time, they knitted as children to supplement the family income. And over the years, they've become quite expert in a few different techniques, including machine knitting and spinning. But their really fine and intricate lace work is extraordinary, and they've brought a lot of that today to show us, so we're in for a real treat. So I just want to say thank you so much for agreeing to come on Fruity Knitting, Kathleen and Anne. It's super to have you here, and I can just see this so much amazing lace work here to show, so I'm so excited.
Oh, we're happy to be here.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Good. So both of you are two sisters out of four sisters. So I thought we might start with just a little bit of knitting or family knitting history. Can you say something about what your mother and her sisters were likely to have been knitting, and then what you both knitted as children and then later as teenagers, and then how or when you finally got into this amazing intricate lace work?
Well, our mother, I would have classed her as a lace knitter, because that's what she usually did, and this is what she would have done when we were children. She was always knitting these lace cardigans, but she would start working in Edie's of Vaughan, was a big knitwear firm down in Vaughan where they lived, so her and her sisters worked there, and she would have been doing the hand knitting, as they all were at one time, until the machine came in the late 20s, when the first knitting machine came to Vaughan. So some of the ladies, they were taught there by a lady who came up from Liverpool to teach the first one to knit on the machine.
Okay.
And after that, there were a few that got going. Two of our aunts knitted on the machine at Vaughan, but our mother never did. So she just mainly concentrated on hand knitting and the lace.
This is really beautiful. What is this stitch pattern here?
This is what our mother called the Palm Beach.
Okay, yeah.
Although in Patron books you see it called a different name, but we always call it the Palm Beach. Is that what we knew it as?
And that was one of her favourite patrons.
It was, yes.
That's a very gorgeous jacket. That's a female adult jacket, isn't it?
It's one she knitted for me when I was probably in my 20s. Yeah.
So what were you knitting as children? I thought you said once that you were knitting vests.
Well, that was the first thing I can remember knitting. I can remember us all sitting at night, the three of us. And
the boys
too.
Yeah,
the boys did too, we're brothers. Knitting vests that we would have worn. I can't actually remember wearing them, but we obviously did wear them.
Yeah.
That's the first thing I remember knitting. And then later on, our mother learned us to knit wee Fair Isle mitts for kids, and that would have been the first things that we would have sold and gotten money for.
Okay, and were you about 8 or 9 then?
No, I think I would have been probably 12, 13
Yeah.
when I
Yeah.
knitted the first thing to sell.
And just going back quickly to the vests, was that just garter stitch?
Yeah, just garter stitch
Yeah.
and then
A little straps over the shoulders.
Just for people who don't know what a vest is, that's it's like a singlet or a spencer, isn't it? It's it's a warm undergarment to put under your shirt or something. Yeah,
Yeah.
great. So you also did Fair Isle, quite a lot of Fair Isle. Were you doing that as teenagers?
Yes, the only fair thing I was doing was little mitts.
Okay.
I'd never got much further than that with me.
Yeah.
Fair Isle.
I remember knitting my first Fair Isle probably when I was a teenager, and it was black and white. I've still got it actually, but I got it in acrylic yarn. Which
Really?
Yeah, something I wouldn't like to use now, but that was my first. But I've knitted. Yeah, I remember knitting Fair Isle cardigan for my mum and a few for myself, and I still like to knit Fair Isle.
Okay.
But lace is my sort of passion.
So when did the lace start?
Well, my first memory of lace was when I was in primary school, and we used to get knitting in primary school at that time. And I'd finished my project at school, and my mother knew the knitting teacher, and she knew she had this pattern, the bird's eye, and she wanted to learn it. And so she suggested that I asked to do the bird's eye. And I had no idea what the bird's eye was like. So I, being the dutiful daughter, I said, yes, I would do. And the bird's eye, if you know that, it's not an easy pattern. It's certainly not a beginner's pattern.
Okay.
And at that time, the patterns were all written out, like knit two. There was no graph, and it was all written out longhand. So, and I struggled. And I would knit a piece and have to rip it back and knit a piece and rip it back. But eventually I got it made, and then I taught my mother how to knit it.
Okay.
She couldn't follow a pattern.
Yeah.
She had to have the knitted
Sample.
piece,
Yeah.
and then she could copy it from that.
Okay, so if she had this in front of her, she could read what was going on and
she
then
could
copy it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so she made hundreds of bird's eye scarves. She was still knitting them up until the time that she died.
All because of you.
All because of me.
Yeah. Well, you're both really well known as amazing lace knitters. So, and you both love it. You both love lace above everything else, don't you?
Yep.
Well, I do, and I think my mum was happy that we were carrying on the lace tradition.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I thought it would be really interesting to you as viewers if I asked Kathleen and Anne to show us around 6 really typical Shetland lace stitch patterns, just so that we can get an idea of what typical ones that were used, and then they could tell us how they're constructed and how you can do variations on them and how they like to combine them together. So we've got some here. So I thought maybe we'll start with you, Anne.
The first one I'm going to start with is, I think, my favourite lace pattern. It was one of my favourites. My mum's favourites was the print and the wave. Some people call it the print of the wave, but my mum always called it the print and the wave. And this is just a simple one. This is actually a shawl my mum knitted for me when I was expecting my first child. So this has been used as a baby shawl. So this is the basic print and the wave. And then so you quite often got it in the centre of a shawl, but it can be used. This is a fancier one. This has got the 2 lobes, and it makes a nice edging for a shawl.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And then you can get the even fancier one. It's got 3 lobes, so that makes a beautiful centre of a shawl. So it's a very versatile pattern, and it's a very simple pattern because every second row is a plain row.
Okay.
So you get a lot for your money in the print and the wave.
Yeah, okay.
My understanding was that this represented the footprints in the sand, and this was the waves. That was my understanding of the pattern.
And this has to be another very common pattern. You've got it both there, the tree and the tree here.
The tree alive. So that is used a lot in lace shawls.
And that's a quite easy pattern to knit?
It's very easy, very simple. And you can make it smaller or larger. So it's, again, it's a very handy pattern to know.
Okay. So you can
adapt it.
Exactly.
Yeah, you can change the size of it to suit what is sort of happening below it and above it. So this is the bird's eye pattern I was speaking about. This is the first pattern I ever did. And it's every row is a Patron row. And there's a lot of taking 3 togethers. And when it's made in fine cobweb like this, quite often you ended up breaking your thread or something. Like I know this off by heart. Like the first row is
yarn over.
Yarn over.
Because you don't say yarn over.
We say wool forward.
Wool forward.
Yeah, or
Okay.
cast up would be the Shetland way of saying it. Cast up.
Okay.
So it's yarn over, knit 3, yarn over, knit 3 together all the way along.
Okay.
Yeah. So
how many rows in the actual pattern repeat are there?
it's a 10 row repeat. 6 stitches.
Okay.
But obviously it's really only 5 rows that you need to learn.
Yeah.
And 2 of that rows are the same anyway, so there's not much you have to learn. But it's not my favourite pattern, and I wouldn't have put this pattern in the centre of a shawl or anything. It's nice in scarves, but I do use it, the individual motif. I have quite often used it in shawls. Just this...
okay, so that's around the edging, isn't it?
Around the edges of the diamond, yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I mean, do you ever use lifelines?
No.
No, you're too good.
And no stitch markers. They don't work with stitch markers.
So if you do a mistake, well, first of all, there's pattern on both sides, isn't there? So you never get a straight knit row.
No, not in this, no.
Yeah. And the other thing is there's no purl stitches, is there?
No, it's all garter.
Yeah, so you're lovers of knit stitches.
Yes.
That's right.
Yes, we avoid purling at all costs. Yes.
Okay, so most Shetland shawls are based on the garter stitch, is that right? Yeah. Okay.
All traditional ones was garter stitch. Yeah.
And you can see that on the edging, can't you?
Yeah.
Here. So if you were to do a mistake, do you just do you rip all back, or do you sort of just go ladder down and fix up?
Well,
that
I would just drop the wee piece and then knit it back up.
Okay.
Unless it was away, you'd notice the mistake away further down, then I'd just rip it back.
That's beautiful. And here, just on the edging, is that also the bird's eye?
That is the bird's eye, just one in there. And this wee pattern here, this is a handy wee pattern as well. This is the pitty flea. And this is just yarn over, knit 3 together, yarn over, knit 1. And every second row is plain. So that's quite a handy one to have. That's used a lot. You'll see that a lot in shawls.
As fillers? Filler stitches?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So what have you got there, Kathleen?
Well, I have this one. This is the Alice Maud pattern. And I first saw this in the Heirloom Knitting book. And I've made it a lot in the centre of shawls since then. I think the pattern is about 36 stitches, but it's a lovely pattern. You can alter it. You can either make it a bit wider or a bit narrower just by either putting on an extra yarn over 2 together, put extra, or taking one out to make it a bit less. So it's less of a wave, or you can have more of a wave going up there. And it's pattern every row, because I don't like purling. I hate purling so much at this cardigan, I made it in the round and cut it up. So that's how my purling.
Your mother would have been horrified.
Really? So your mum did purl?
Yes, she did. In her cardigan, she purled.
So that's Alice Maud.
So you were saying you could make the zigzag section wider.
Yes.
Can you also make the inside sort of little diamond shape wider as well?
You could, but I've never done that. I just like that diamond the way it is.
Yeah.
Yes, and I just like to alter the zigzag bit if I have to alter any of it.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And have you used that at all on the edge or the border? Is that stitch pattern there in any way?
No, I've not done that in this border. But this is another little one. This is the Pity Bead and Diamond. Pity, that's for little. Okay. Pity Bead and Diamond, which I use as in the shawl. Going out around the edge there, that's the Pity Bead and Diamond.
Okay. Yes,
so it's a good one to fill in too. Yes.
So what can you say about the yarns used here? That looks slightly woollier.
It is woollier. I can't even remember what yarn this was. But this one here, this is a cashmere silk and wool.
Okay, that's why
that's
it's a bit
why it's
shinier,
so fine.
isn't it? Yeah.
And it's a bit slidey, so it's a more awkward. You have to be more careful when you're knitting with it. If you drop a stitch, it's a nightmare.
Yeah, it'll just shoot to the bottom.
Yes, it does. For something woollier, if you were to drop a stitch, it doesn't have the same effect. It doesn't go way down so fast.
So was this a christening shawl? Or what
Well,
kind
it would
of shawl?
be yes, it would. That would be the only thing, or a wedding.
Yeah.
It's no use for every day. This is the cockleshell scarf. I've not really made many cockleshell scarves, but this one I did specially for the Highland show this past year. So I put beads in it. I think there's 350 beads in this, and it took me over 50 hours to knit it. And I got third prize at the Highland show.
Only third prize.
So that was that one. So, but I think it's something that I would, after doing this one, it's something that I would do again. And this one is done in this fine cashmere silk and wool. Now, usually when you're stretching a cockleshell, what you would do, you would just take the 2 points, like each end together when you're washing it. But with this fine yarn, I thought to get rid of that marks, it would be a problem. So what I did, I took a piece of cardboard, which I shaped the ends before I stretched it.
Clever.
So it took a bit of measuring.
And just sewed up other stitches.
Yes.
Very clever.
Wow. That's beautiful. So what is your favourite yarn to do very fine lace knitting in?
I do like this for very fine, but the Shetland Supreme, I do use it too. And I quite like it. Sometimes it's nice to do something that is from Shetland to work with this. But lately I got such a big cone of this from a friend that I've made, I don't know how many shawls using this.
Yeah, and that's the cashmere silk blend.
Silk and wool, yes.
Silk and
it
wool.
was sourced in Italy.
You both spin, don't you?
Yeah, I don't do as much spinning as I used to do, but I used to do quite a bit of spinning.
Yeah. And didn't you say, was it you, Kathleen, or one of you learned to spin simply so that you could get the fine lace?
That was me.
That was you.
Yeah. That was,
Okay.
When we were young, we never had a spinning wheel in our house, but there was a neighbour not far away. I think they had 3 wheels.
Yeah.
So we would go down with my mother visiting at night, and that was going out about the night.
That was a highlight.
Poor Mum would have taken her knitting with her. They never went out anywhere at night without their knitting. So she'd been sitting knitting, and the lady down there, we would have a go on the spinning wheel. And I think we never did enough to ever make wool to knit with, enough. Yeah. But I think just doing that, when we came to try the spinning wheel, well, I just found you just took to it right away, because I suppose it's a bit like cycling a bike.
Yeah.
If you learn when you're young, you'll never forget it.
Yeah.
So it was a bit like that.
What I saw Kathleen's work for the first time last year during the 2017 Wool Week, and I was completely blown away. It just stood out as being magnificent and so intricate and beautiful, and I thought we've got to have you both on the show sometime, so it's great that you're here. But I asked both Kathleen and Anne to bring along 2 of their favourite designs to show you and talk about, so how they've constructed. So we'll have a look at those now.
Now this shawl, when it's complete, there is neither a cast on stitch or a cast off stitch on it. What we do is we start at the lace edge, and we knit a few rows in a cotton thread. Then after that we get on to the lace edge and we knit all around all the lace edge. And this one I know took me 28 hours to knit that lace edge.
Okay.
And then after that we pick up enough for the first quarter. I think in this shawl it's 370 stitches on a quarter, and knit it up and taking in, shaping it all the way. So that 1 quarter, and you go on, when you're finished your 4th quarter, then you knit that whole row, and then you knit in your centre. The patterns in this is just bits and pieces I've taken from different shawls. I did a black shawl last year, and this bit here and that piece is from the quarters in the black shawl. This bit here is from, I did a stole a couple of years ago, a commission that was done for the widow of a famous pop artist, Roy Lichtenstein. I don't know if I'm saying the name right, but anybody who knows will know who it is. So that's where that patterns came from. And then, of course, this is the Alice Maud pattern. So after I finish knitting the centre, then I go on and I graft the centre to the, which would have been the second quarter. It's grafted on there. And what I graft in is that holy row. That's the grafting row, that row of holes.
And what's amazing is it looks exactly the same as the row where you picked up stitches to knit this. You can't tell what's grafted and what's not grafted.
And then after that I'll graft up the 4 corners.
Wow.
Yeah, the finishing is really important, because if that's not done properly, then you can spoil a garment.
Absolutely.
So that is,
we see that so often.
Yeah, that's vital. And that's a skill we learned from our mother.
Absolutely.
So.
We did, yes.
So when you say finishing, you're talking about things like grafting.
Yes.
And what else? The blocking as well, but mainly the grafting.
Mainly the grafting, the grafting. Because when we were young, we did learn to graft, because that's another thing our mother did. She used to graft. We called it finishing. She would get a bag with so many chumpers to finish, and that was grafting on the necks, grafting on the cuffs, and sewing them up, and the rib at the bottom, sewing it up. And when we came big enough that she could trust us, then we would start and we would graft on a cuff for her. That was our start. And that's how we learned to graft.
So we all did
and
that.
it's something I absolutely still love doing.
Really?
Is grafting.
Yeah. And so who's the lucky person who's getting this?
Well, I don't know. It's not made for anybody special. If somebody came along and wanted to buy it, they could at a price. But at the moment, they go in a box under the bed.
So if she gets cold in the winter night, she just pulls out one.
And someday, when I'm gone, and the daughters, 4 daughters, and I've 10 grandchildren, and they come to clear up, and they'll find all the shawls under the bed. So I hope there's one for each of them.
Wow, a treasure trove. That's beautiful. Can you estimate how many hours it took you?
I didn't time myself really with this one, but one knitted in the same yarn, maybe 2-3 years ago, it was about near 150 hours.
Yeah. That's pretty fast. That's actually pretty fast.
Is it?
Yeah.
And the most boring bit is knitting the lace edge.
Yeah.
This one, 28 hours, I was just...
Yeah. But that's pretty fast because there's a lot of stitches in this. That's impressive. I was thinking that you'd, well, in my opinion, my humble opinion, I was expecting you to say, more than that, 250 or something.
Oh, yeah. But see, that's just was years of doing this.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, one day it was the Shetland Guild of Spinners, Weavers and Dyers Tees. This girl came up to me and asked if I could knit something for her to wear around her shoulders at her wedding. So I said yes. And this, I started to think about it then, and it was a few sleepless nights, I'll tell you, because things would come in my head. I would waken up with these things that I could do, how I could design this. And so I started looking on it like panels going up, where I started decreasing by taking three together at different points there. And this is how it came about. I started jotting it down on this graph paper and working it out till it came up to the point at the neck.
Yeah.
And how I went about, I knitted the lace edge for it along the bottom. And I think there's about nearly 500 stitches along the bottom. I picked up all the lace edge and started knitting up, and continued the lace edge up each side, going up each side, till I came to about the last stitches at the neck. I think it was about 73 stitches. So from there, when I'd finished that, then I had to knit a piece of lace edge in from that side and a piece of lace edge in from that side. So that's all the grafting I had to do in that, was to graft that bits of lace edge on and then graft up that little centerpiece.
And that's so delicate. It just kind of sits like a little curtain around the shoulders.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yes, and this is knitted in the Shetland Supreme yarn from Jamisons and Smith.
It's beautiful. It's
So that came about.
And what's the stitch pattern here? That is
Shell grid is this sort of diamonds.
and you've used different stitch patterns.
Yes, and this is in the heirloom knitting book. If you look at that, you'll get this shell grid. And inside that, you can just put any little pattern you want to. So this is all different. There's a little fern here. There's the pity flea and the pity bead and diamond. And then some, I'm not sure what it is, just falls in.
Well, this is the first hand-spun shawl I ever made. And I saw a photo of this shawl in a magazine. Yeah, the New Shetlander magazine. And I just loved the design. I loved the horseshoes and the stars. And I thought, well, I really want to be able to knit that. So I started just playing around with patterns, see if I could recreate. The first bit I tried to do was the horseshoe, and it took me ages to get it, and the star was quite difficult. But I really enjoyed, because up until then, I'd just been following patrons. And then I realised, well, hey, it's not that difficult, really, to design your own stuff. And that really got me hooked on lace when I saw the possibilities of how you could design your own. And this was really why I learned to spin, because my ambition was to spin enough yarn to knit a shawl, like how it was done in Eunson all that years ago.
And this is very fine. And this is your spinning?
This is a 2-ply hand spun.
Okay, so you taught yourself this horse shell and star pattern based on that photo, that early photo.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And what else is in here?
Well, we've got the bird's eye, we've got the pity flea, and we've got the spider's web, which that's a pattern I don't like knitting, but I like the look of it. Mm. And this here, I was just needing something to fill in there, so I just made that up.
Okay.
I needed something, to fill in. Yeah.
That's very beautiful. So did you, in the original design, was this the pattern that they had in the centre?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you didn't know how to do the spider web before. No. You just looked at it and figured it out.
Yeah.
That's so clever.
I don't know.
I bet your learning curve on lace, I mean, you would have to have got through that from just a photo, you would have taught yourself so much.
Oh yeah, I mean it was a challenge, easy. But it's lace is not as difficult as it looks. Well, I think it's
when you break it down to small units.
Yeah, because it's only simple stitches, only like wool forward and knit 2 together, wool forward 3 together. Yeah. It's just simple stitches.
I think the hardest thing is probably the planning, not the actual knitting, but the planning, to think, okay, how is it going to look balanced? How many stitches do I need? If I'm decreasing, what's a good pattern that's going to fit in that amount of stitches? And would you say so?
So when I designed this one, I would just knit it a straight swatch like this to see how the patterns were going to work good. And I sometimes still do that. But this would have been before the days of graphing charts down.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I didn't chart it.
So you just made notes to yourself?
Yeah, I would knit the swatch.
So you'd knit the swatch and then you'd always go back to it for reference?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. It's beautiful. It's really beautiful. Okay, now tell us also about the design that you were commissioned to do by the museum.
Oh yeah, I don't know, that's maybe 18 years ago. I was the Guild of Spinners Weavers when they actually owned and ran the museum.
The Textile Museum.
They asked if I would knit a veil for their collection. I thought, well, yeah, I would do that. And one of the other members, she spun the yarn. She spun this beautiful 2-ply yarn. And I thought, well, I really need to do justice to this yarn. I'm not just going to knit a square shawl and turn it into a veil. So initially I didn't know how I was going to shape it, because I had nothing to
you had
copy.
To
yeah. And I wanted it so it was long and right down to the ground. So I thought, well, if I make like 2 long like quarters, that could go up either side of the shawl, either side of the veil.
Yeah.
And then I knit a long, thin triangle. It came up between them and went over the head.
Yes.
And the lace edge would carry on up around. Yeah. And that's to date, that's my favourite piece of knitting I've ever done.
Wow.
So that's in the collection at the Bod.
And how long did it take you?
Oh, I have no idea. A long time. A long time. It's, I suppose, the biggest piece of knitting I've done, really. Yeah.
That's great. So what I also think is really interesting is that both of you have done quite a lot of machine knitting. So how did you first get interested in machine knitting, and also how do you feel about it in comparison to hand knitting?
Well, I got into machine because at one time, I used to do finishing for a firm and do so many jumpers every week. And then that was in decline, and that's when I learned to knit my first shawl, was 40 years ago. But 2 years later, I thought, I would phone around and see if there was any finishing to be had, because I would love to do that again. But no, there wasn't much of that. But Smiths of Sandwich asked if I would take a knitting machine from them and if I would knit for them. So that's what I did. So I got this machine and I knitted for them, I think for about 10 years.
Okay.
Yeah. That's when you would get it. Would come on a bus and you would get this big bundle of wool on a Thursday night, I think it used to arrive, and all through the week you would knit this 20 jumpers. The next Thursday that would go back on the bus, and at night you would get another load of wool. And I loved that. I really loved it.
Yeah. And what about you?
Well, my first job when I left school, we lived in Vaughan, the only job sort of in that area was at TM Areas and Sons, like where mother and aunts had worked when they were young. So I went there to work on a knitting machine, like the big V-beds, dubiods, and I worked there probably maybe 5 years, and I really, really enjoyed it. But when I left there, I thought, that's it, I won't be having a knitting machine because they're so big and like for storing in your house. And then a few years back, I sort of had a midlife crisis, and I decided I would go and do the contemporary textile course at the college here. And then lo and behold, there was the same knit machines that I'd been working on at Aries, and also the domestic computerised machines. And I mean, I had been aware of that computerised machines because my sister-in-law had one and neighbours had one, but I always thought it Fair Isle lace should be hand knitted. Yeah. But when I got to play on them at the college, I thought, wow, these machines are just brilliant. Yeah. So now I've got 3 knitting machines in my house again. A wee V-bed and 2 electronic machines. Yeah.
So we're going to finish off now with something really extraordinary and a lot of fun. Anne here has knitted herself a garden fence, and she knitted it out of strong black fishing net twine. So that's amazing. We'll show you some pictures of it. But so, Anne, you have to tell us, how did you knit it, as in what kind of things did you knit it with? How long did it take? And of course, we definitely want to know what Shetland lace stitch pattern you used.
Yeah. Well, the reason I knitted it initially was because I'd moved into that house a few years ago, and it had a black chain link fence, and I hated it. And I thought, well, how can I get a new fence, and it's going to be cheap, and I could do it myself. And the original had like angle iron uprights and a top and a bottom wire, and I thought, well, perfect for a frame for putting on a bit of lace. And I thought, well, I need something that it's going to be durable. So I just went to the net mending store and came back with this polypropylene twine. And I mentioned to him, I sort of, Mr. Fix-It man who does odd jobs and things, I mentioned to him, said, I was thinking the knit offends. And he yeah. And so the next week he came, and I said I needed big knitting needles. So the next week he came along with this beautiful pair of knitting needles that he'd made from a old curtain pole, a wooden curtain pole. So I got started, and I thought the perfect pattern, my favourite pattern would be the print and the wave, which is, so it's just a long strip of the print and wave.
Yeah.
It goes, it was only 23 stitches, so it's, and it, I can't mind how many metres it was, but it only took me about 3 weeks to knit it.
Okay.
But,
you must have looked so funny. Did you sit out in the front garden?
No, I sat in my house and I knitted it, and I knitted as much as I thought, oh well, I'm sure this might stretch. So the guy who made my needles, he came and helped me put it in situ. And when I was getting to the end, I thought, oh no, I'm going to have to knit a few more rows. And I think I had to knit about 6 extra rows. So I had to sit on a wee box on the pavement and knitting the last 6 rows. And neighbours probably thought I was a bit mad.
That's such a brilliant story.
Yeah.
And has anybody else taken it on? You haven't started a craze here?
No.
No, my garden is too big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's a brilliant idea when you've already got the frame, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's that is 6 years since it went, and it's still just as it was, so it should last a long time.
Yeah. Well, we have to say goodbye now, but it's been so much fun just being with both of you here and seeing your amazing work and hearing about it, and especially your funny story. So thanks to both of you for agreeing to come on Fruity Knitting.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
So we'll say goodbye to the viewers. Bye.
Bye.
'Twas on one bright March morning I bid New Orleans adieu, and I took the road to Jackson Town, me fortune to renew. I cursed a foreign money, no credit could I gain, which filled me heart with longing for the lakes of Pontchartrain. I stepped on board of a railroad car beneath the morning sun, and I rode the road till evening, and I laid me down again. All strangers here, no friends to me, till a dark girl towards me came, and I fell in love with a Creole girl from the lakes of Pontchartrain. I said, my pretty Creole girl, me money here's no good. If it weren't for the alligators, I'd sleep out in the wood. You're welcome here, kind stranger. Our house is very plain, but we never turn a stranger out at the lakes of Pontchartrain. She took me to her mommy's house, and she treated me quite well. The hair upon her shoulders in jet black ringlets fell, to try and paint her beauty, I'm sure 'twould be in vain. So handsome was me Creole girl from the lakes of Pontchartrain.
I asked her if she'd marry me. She said it could never be, for she had got another